We are on a new webinar today, and we are going to discuss quality assessment of estimates for decision making. So we've got about an hour together. As usual, please keep so we'll have the Q&A at the end. So feel free to ask a question during the presentation, but we will answer them towards the end. So we're going to go through a few slides first, and then there will be two introductions to the coding exercise. And voila. So all of the resources from previous week, including last week, are on the OLC. There was a bit of a delay this week because of Thanksgiving in the US, but the World Bank GDF has uploaded everything now. So feel free to go back and look at the resources. And a reminder as well, we do have the discussion group on the OLC. So if you've got any question about the course content or the coding exercise, please don't hesitate to ask, and the instructors will be very happy to help. Right, let's get started. So I'm very pleased to welcome Ayumi Arai from the University of Tokyo, and who's an associate professor. And as I said today, Ayumi, you are talking about quality assessment. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophie, for introduction. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining. So in this session, we'll talk about quality assessment of estimates for decision making with a focus on indicators derived from mobile phone data, especially CDR, call detail record. So the central question today is that when we derive indicators from mobile phone data, whether they are reliable enough to support real decisions. So in this session, we focus on how to assess the quality of aggregates and estimate from mobile phone data. And first, we will look at completeness, coverage, and bias, who is represented and who is missing. And secondly, we will check plausibility and temporal consistency and how sensitive results are to our assumption using external benchmarks. And finally, we will discuss how to communicate uncertainty and limitation to decide whether our indicators are fit for a specific policy use. By the end of this session, you'll be able to identify key quality issues in mobile phone data-based indicators. For example, which population groups are missing and where network coverage is limited. And then you'll be able to assess whether results are reasonable using simple checks like time series plot or comparisons with census. And third, being able to communicate limitations clearly. So these are the results from CDR data and can support decisions without being over-interpreted. So let's move on to the dimension of quality assessment. So why is quality assessment aggregate so important? There are mainly two reasons. First, mobile phone data are not a random sample of the population. So they are generated by people who own and use SIM card from the particular operators. And second, these data are not collected from statistical purposes. They come from network operators, billing, and service provision. As a result, we can have incomplete coverage of certain population groups or areas, and there may be biased pattern where some groups are overrepresented and others are underrepresented. And there could be misleading patterns which are made not by real changes in people's behavior, but some assumption or methodological choices in the process of analysis. So without proper quality assessment, a decision maker may draw misleading conclusions from these aggregates. For example, they might believe that an area has very low mobility or very small population simply because the data do not capture those people properly. So quality assessment is a core requirement if we want to use mobile phone data to support planning and decision making. So to structure our discussion, I like to use three dimensions of quality assessment that are particularly relevant for mobile phone data. The first is data integrity and coverage. Here we ask, are the aggregates value complete and consistent over time and across geography? And do they really cover the population or area we are interested in? The second is analytical robustness. This is about how sensitive the results are to our assumptions and parameter choices. So we also ask, do the patterns look plausible and reasonably stable over time? And the third is interpretability and use of indicators. In other words, are we clear about what exactly the indicator measures, what its limitations are, and what it can safely be used for? So we'll come back to these three dimensions throughout the session and use them almost like a checklist for assessing mobile phone data-based indicators. Okay, now let's move on to dimension 1, integrity and coverage. So here are the key questions. Here are the key questions for the dimension 1. Are the aggregates value complete over time? For example, do we have missing days or sudden break because of network changes? Are they complete over space? Are there district, rural area, or border regions where the operators has very limited coverage? And do they really reflect the population we are interested in? For example, residents of the country or any active SIM from one operator? This dimension is crucial because it tells us where the results are reliable and where we need to be careful when using them for planning and decision making. A very common coverage issue is the difference between urban and rural areas. In urban areas, there are many cell towers close together. So that means we can detect the relatively short trips and daily movements within the city quite well. On the other hand, in rural area, towers are fewer and farther apart. So many short trips inside the village or between nearby villages don't appear as movement in the mobile phone data because the phones stay connected to the same tower. The consequence is that our aggregates, for example, commuting flow or daytime population, may suggest that rural people hardly move at all, but in reality, they do move. The network just doesn't see the movement clearly. This is a classic example of a coverage gap, and it can easily bias our interpretation if we don't explicitly recognize it and communicate it to users. So let's look at the concrete example. Imagine that the Transport Authority uses mobile phone data to estimate daily commuting flows within district in order to plan local public transport. And we have two regions. In Region A, a dense urban district, there are many towers, maybe every few hundred meters. Commuting trips of 2 to 4 kilometers maybe within the city are captured reasonably well, and we can infer both the origin and destination of these trips. But in Region B, a rural district, a tower might be 5 to 15 kilometers apart, and commuting within a rural town or between nearby villages is often not detected as a separate trip. As a result, the estimated commuting flows in Region B are much lower than the true number of commuters. In practice, we would expect the real commuting volume in Region B to be higher. We might consider adjusting the estimate using other data, such as school enrollment data or labor force survey, or at least warning users that rural commuting is likely to be underestimated. Okay, let's move on to the dimension 2, analytical robustness. Now, sorry. Here we assume that we already have the data and we are turning them into indicators. For example, defining home, extracting trips, or scaling counts to match census total. The key questions are, how sensitive are our indicators to the modeling choices we make? So when we look at the values and trend over time, do they look plausible? And if we use different method or different data sources, do we get similar messages or a completely different one? This dimension is very important because it directly affects trust. If an indicator changes a lot when we only slightly change a parameter, policymaker will ask whether they can rely on it. So every indicator we derive from mobile phone data depends on a set of assumptions and parameters. For example, how many records per day do we need to classify a mobile SIM card as an active? How do we define a person's home location? Is it where they are most nights over a month, or do we use some over other rules? And what distance and time threshold do we use to define a trip? So if we change these assumptions slightly and the indicator changes a lot, that is a sign of weak robustness. That's why it is essential to document these assumptions clearly and run sensitivity check, for example, comparing results using different home detection rules. Sorry. For example, we might take a number of active mobile users in a district and scale it up so that it matches the census population in the district. In District A, a former residential, suppose we have two different districts. In District A, a former residential area with stable housing, the census is relatively complete. In that case, the scaling factor works reasonably well, and the results are close to reality. In District B, an informal settlement area with many seasonal workers or informal dwellers, the census may undercount these populations. If we use the same scaling approach, the factor in District B will underestimate the true population, and our adjusted indicator will still be too low in that area. In other words, scaling with census data does not automatically remove bias. If the census itself has problem in some area, that bias is simply carried over into the mobile phone data-based estimates. Now imagine a disaster response scenario. Authorities want to use dynamic population estimates from mobile phone data to support emergency support distribution during a flood or cyclone. In District B, where informal settlements are concentrated, the scale population estimate is lower than the real number of people living there because the census undercount them sometimes. If we rely on these estimates, we may underallocate emergency supplies, such as food, water, or shelter, to the community that are actually most vulnerable. To reduce this risk, there are some ways. We can run multiple scaling scenarios using different assumptions, and we use local knowledge to adjust scaling factors in high-risk district, or at least to flag these areas as low confidence zones so that emergency planners know they need to be careful. This example shows that analytical robustness is not just a technical issue. It can have very real consequences for people's lives. Okay, so another part of analytical robustness is simply asking, do these numbers make sense over time? So plausibility checks help us spot values that are clearly too high, too low, or completely out of patterns. And temporal logic means checking whether the patterns over time make sense when you think about weekday versus weekend, holidays, non-seasonal patterns, and major event or shocks. So these checks don't require complex statistics. Very often, simple chart and comparison with calendar or known events are enough to review potential issue in the data or the way we've processed them. So let's take an example or dynamic population estimate for a central business district. Suppose we see that estimated population in this business area is higher on Sunday than on weekdays. And in the context, weekends are expected to show lower presence in the city center in this country. So our first reaction should be to ask, is this consistent with how this area is used? Or could there be a regular market or tourist attraction that would explain high activity on Sundays? So if there is no obvious reason, then this pattern may point to a data issue, such as missing record on some weekdays, or a processing issue, such as misclassifying home or work location. So the plausibility and temporal checks help us avoid presenting unusual patterns when they are really just caused by problems in the data or in the way we process them, rather than real changes in people's behavior. Another example is seasonal migration in agricultural areas. Imagine we produce monthly residential population estimates by district, and we see a large increase in the rural population in a month that does not match the agricultural calendar or seasonal labor patterns. In that case, we would start by asking, do these changes align with known planting or harvest seasons? Or do we see corresponding decreases in the area where people usually migrate from? Then, if the pattern does not fit the non-seasonal pattern, it may suggest that our home detection rules or time window are not appropriate. For example, a simple month-by-month window might cut across a real migration period and mix different behavior together. And again, the goal is to make sure that we investigate unexpected patterns because we use them to inform policy. Now let's move on to validation. For indicators produced from mobile phone data, validation basically means comparing our estimates with other data sources and check whether trends are consistent. These other sources can include census data or population registers, household or travel survey, administrative data such as school enrollment or transport count, and even remote sensing data like nighttime lights. The goal is not to get perfect agreement. This is almost impossible. So instead, we look for patterns. Where do we see agreement and where do we see systematic differences that we need to understand and explain? One simple way to validate population estimates is to compare them with known population data at some geographic level, for example, by district. We can run a regression on a simple correlation between the CDR-based population estimate and the census-based population count or densities. Sometimes we use log transform value to handle very large differences between small and large districts. Now imagine we find that in one district, the CDR-based estimate or resident population is about 20% higher than the census figure. Instead of immediately saying one of them is wrong, we should ask, is this a fast-growing peri-urban area where the census may already be outdated? Are there many temporary residents or commuters that the census may have missed? And in some case, this kind of difference might be actually indicate that mobile phone data are capturing a more recent reality than last census, rather than simply being in an error. we should not automatically say that CDR estimate is better than the census. There may also be other factors behind this gap. For example, multi-SIM users, commuters being misclassified as residents, or differences in the reference period between the census and the CDR data. So the 20% difference becomes something we investigate and interpret, not something we ignore. If after checking the local context, we conclude that the rapid growth is a plausible explanation, we can keep the estimate, but we should document this clearly in the quality note and flag the district as an area with higher uncertainty. This is a good example of how validation is not just about matching numbers, but understanding and explaining discrepancy in transparent way. Okay, now let's move on to the dimension 3, interpretability and use of indicators. Now we move to dimension 3, and here we are less focus on how the numbers are calculated and more on how they are understood and used. The key question here are, first, are our assumptions, limitation, and sources of uncertainty clearly communicated? Do users know what is behind the numbers and where they are weaker? And second, is the indicator appropriate for the intended use or decision-making context? In other words, is it good enough for this specific purpose? For example, monitoring trend, targeting area, or allocating resources. This dimension is crucial because even a technically good indicator can be misused if people don't understand what it really represents. So for indicator based on the mobile phone data, there are a few things we should always make clear. First, who is represented? Is this subscribers of one of operator, all operators, or calibrated estimates meant to represent the whole population? And second, where coverage is weak. For example, rural region, border area, or particular district where the signal or market share is low. And third, key modeling assumption, such as how we detect home location or how we scale the count to match population figures. And finally, where uncertainty is higher, for instance, in districts with informal settlements or very low mobile penetration. So we can share this information through metadata, short technical notes, or simple explanation next to the map and tables. And this helps managers and policymakers understand how far they can trust the numbers and where they should be cautious. So let's end with a simple example using OD matrices. Suppose we build an OD matrix from mobile phone data that shows a movement between districts, and then we scale it using the total census population. In reality, these flows are based mainly on mobile and usually adult users. Children, who are a large share of the population in many countries, often do not have their own phones, and even when they move, their patterns are different from adults. So if we scale the flow using the entire population, including children, we are implicitly assuming that children and adults move in the same way. This is usually not true. As a result, the scaled OD matrix can overestimate travel volumes, and it can give a distorted picture of mobility when we try to interpret it as a movement for the whole population. So what are the risks there? First, we might overplan transport capacity or evacuation needs. evacuation needs on some route because the OD matrix makes it look like many more people are traveling than actually the case. And second, we could misallocate resources or misinterpret mobility patterns for specific age groups, especially children and young people. So the good practice would include a few simple steps, clearly stating that the OD matrix mainly reflects mobile, adult user, not the entire population, and flagging this limitation in countries with very young populations, where children are a large share of the total, and where possible, using age-adjusted scaling factor based on the travel survey or household survey. And again, the message is not, don't use OD matrices. This message is use them with a clear understanding of what they represent and how they were produced. Okay. So let's move on to the practical exercise because coding exercises is part of this session. So now you can see this is a quality assurance, and this slide is intro to the practical exercise. In the task, we have a quality assessment of OD matrices for disaster preparedness, and I will explain the flow of the exercise using the following slide. But while doing so, maybe I will recommend that you will access to this link. I hope you can maybe, I don't know, you can access to this link. Okay, so while you are accessing to this link, I will explain the concept of this exercise. So in this coding exercise, your task is to evaluate an origin-destination matrix derived from mobile phone data. And think of yourself as an analyst in the National Statistical Office, working with disaster response team before major flood or cyclone. So by exploring daily movements between districts in this OD matrix, you will consider how these patterns can inform evacuation route and where to pre-position emergency supplies. Now let me explain our target region and the data you will be working with. The study area contains 7 districts, including one main city and several suburban districts. So you get a mix of dense urban center and surrounding suburban area. And we will focus on months of one month in the flood and cyclone season. And for the data, you will use synthetic CDR data from one MNO with 1,000 anonymized IDs, synthetic census population data, and an administrative boundary data. And the case scenario is that you are assessing an OD matrix generated from mobile phone data for disaster preparedness. And the OD matrix shows daily inter-district mobility between the selected district. And only one MNO provides the data for this project. And OD flows are interpreted with respect to the total census population. And for this exercise, you will work through 3 steps. First, check the data integrity and coverage. Does the mobile phone data give enough temporal and spatial coverage for our purpose? Second, assess analytical robustness by comparing OD results from 2 methods and see how sensitive they are. And third, think about interpretability and use. So where can this indicator support disaster decision with high confidence, and where do we need strong caveat? So on the following slide, you will see an overview and also the key task for each step, so you can refer back to them later. But for now, we will switch over to Google Colab and work through these steps together to see how they are implemented using our synthetic data. So now I stop sharing this slide and move to the Google Colab. So I hope now you can see my, okay. So we have three notebook, and one is step 1, and followed by step 2 and step 3. And for step 1, we have a data integrity and coverage check. So in this step 1, we work with the synthetic CDR data for Brazil in March 2025, and we bring together 4 pieces. So the CDR event log, CDR event log, and daily based home location, and the cell tower catalog, and synthetic census data aggregated to several administrative levels. And the goal is to understand whether the CDR data adequately represent the population over time and across district. So we compute temporal coverage, spatial coverage, and few basic integrity check to see where the data look reliable and where potential gaps or bias might exist. Okay, so I just walk through this notebook to show the flow of the analysis. So for this one, first you will do some setting by installing GeoPandas and dependency. So I just go down. Okay. So then you will do check the temporal coverage, and you can answer following question. How many CDR records are generated each day? How many unique subscribers are active each day? And are there gaps or spikes in the CDR volume? So then you can see the temporal coverage. You can see the result after running these cells. And also you can see the visualized results for the number of active subscriber for each day. Okay. And average active subscriber by day of week. And also we check missing days and weekly pattern. So to detect a gap, we create a complete data range from this minimum to the maximum timestamp and compare it with the dates present in the data. So any missing date indicate day with no CDR activity. So we also mark weekend and weekdays, so explore weekly patterns. So when we run these cells, we can see these results. This indicates a number of observation, and the gray area is a weekend, and the white area is weekday. So you can clearly see the pattern. But there is one day that do not have a record for this that data. It also have an average daily observation by day of week. And we also can check spatial coverage by district. Okay. So we count the number of population in each district and compare the result with census population, synthetic census population. And now you can see the coverage is very small because we have only 1,000 ID. But if you can replace the input data with larger population, you can get the real sense of the coverage, like 70%, 40%. And basic integrity check, you can map the cell tower to see whether there is any towers that is not properly on the map. So it generates a list of the towers which is not on within the boundary of the administrative area. Okay. And also you can all cell tower in the admin area, you can map the result here. Sorry. Okay. And also we can map cell towers without the district mapping. So there are some cell towers whose location might be wrong. In this case, you have to check with your operator or regulator to see what is the reason of this error. So by using this process, you can assess the completeness of a CDR data in time and space and compare a subscriber count against the synthetic census population data. And we also set a low coverage flag highlight the district where caution should be exercised when interpreting mobility indicators. And if you want, you can further refine the analysis by adjusting the coverage threshold depending on the acceptable level of market share, or extending some spatial join using another level of the administrative boundary. Okay, so this is this is step 1. Okay, then let's move on to step 2. Okay. So step 2 is checking the analytical robustness. Here we start turning these CDR traces into an origin-destination matrix, and we derive daily inter-district mobility flow between the selected district, and we compare OD matrices produced under 2 different speeds threshold. So we have 2 different different methodology. So this allows us to assess how sensitive the flows are to the way we define the movements, and to see which districts are more or less stable under different and reasonable and method choices. So first you do a setup and data loading. So I simply go down. Then I think you already have done the home location estimation in other sessions, so I do not go into detail. But we are mapping these results to count the number of subscribers living in each district, because we want to aggregate the number by district and filter the target set of district based on the population or subscriber count. Because we use only the area 7 district, São Paulo and the surrounding area for the further investigation. Okay. Let's go down. So now you can see the number of population, number of subscriber we can get from the home location estimated from CDR data by each district. And this, because we have a synthetic census data, and we can also compute the coverage ratio. As I said, the coverage ratio is relatively low because we have a very few number of only 1,000 IDs for this demonstration. And you also can map how it is distributed in the area. Okay. And we also do reuse continuity model function, which is already done in another session. So you will review that session and I will not go into detail for today. Okay. But the point is, we will have 2 scenarios, method A and B. So we now compute the OD flow using the function defined above, but we have 2 different conditions for the method. One is we use 2 different speed threshold to define the movement. One is the highest speed is 10 km/h, and the low speed is 3 km/h. And method B is high speed at 20 km/h and low is 3 km/h. And these 2 scenarios is also used in the other session. So you will review that session. And we compute the results and compare them. Let's see. Okay. So now we have a number of trips estimated from method A and B. You can see these numbers are different. And also we can see some differences as an absolute count. And we can see the percentage change at the percentage change. Okay. Then, okay. So now also we use home location for both A and B. Okay. sorry, the result is, okay. Okay, this result, we can also discuss this in the following slide. Okay. Then let's move on to the last step. Okay. So that step 3, finally, is the interpretability and use exercise notebook. So in this step, we combine the coverage and integrity insights from step 1 with the robustness results from step 2 to judge how reliable of the OD matrix is for disaster preparedness, and to decide how and where the mobility indicator can safely be used for decision making. Okay. So first we will do data and input, and they set up the data loading. Okay. First, we want to check the coverage. The following code cell compute the coverage ratio per district for the target area. Home records are specially joined for each administrative area, filtered to the 7 districts listed above, we selected, and grouped by district name. Okay, so now you can see the number of subscribers for each district, and also can cover the coverage ratio. And you can set a coverage flag for your convenience. This is just an example. We just set as a high coverage as more than 40%, medium is 0.2 to 40, and low is 20. But you can use this kind of flag to explain which area has a relatively stable result in terms of population coverage and which area is lower in terms of population coverage. And also we can check OD flow and sensitivity. So we computed some percentage change because in response to the methodological change here. Okay. And okay. And we can set the sensitivity flag for the percentage of change and set them, for example, if in this case, we said that if the change is greater than 40% are missing, that is highly sensitive. Sensitivity is high. And if it is 20 to 40, it's medium. And if it's less than 20, it is low. And based on these two indicators, sensitivity flag and quality level flag, we can use some recommendation for use as an flag when you use this data with when you want to use the results. You can use this table to indicate which area is highly sensitive and which area is relatively stable. Okay, so these are just an example for demonstrating a quality check. And you can change the threshold for your purpose and acceptance. And for your reference, you also can visualize this result using color map. So for example, okay, now we visualize, okay, the sensitivity based on we change the color based on sensitivity. So you can also visualize which area you have to be careful and which area you can be relatively confident when you use the result for interpretation. Okay. So lastly, I just want to note that this is exercise, working with only the 100 sample users. So the coverage ratio and also quality classes are driven by 2 illustrative choices. So also you have to apply scaling factor, apply to the number of subscriber, which we'll be discussing other session. And this is just an handpicked threshold for coverage and sensitivities. So these numbers are not meant to reflect the real market share of any operators. So these should be calibrated when you work with the real data. And I hope this exercise is useful. And this is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much for your time and
Thank
for this
you.
webinar, and we'll see
My
you
pleasure.
in other session. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone, and thank you for coming.
Bye.